Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe. We got another great episode for you today. A lot going on in the NFL, but there always is, isn't there? A lot going on. We're going to talk about the Giants coaching situation. I didn't get a chance to talk to you about that last week. Their decision to fire Brian Daboll, where they go from here, etc. I'm going to talk to you about the Eagles. What's going on in that locker room? We're going to touch on J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Shadur Sanders getting his first start. But before I do any of that, I want to go back to 2001 and the New England Patriots. Now, it was about this time during that 2001 season, we were about 11 or 12 weeks in. The Patriots were 5-5, and that surprised a lot of people at the time. They, as you all probably know very well by now, they started off that season 0-2. Drew Bledsoe got hurt. Tom Brady came in. They didn't take off from there necessarily. They won 5 of their next 8 games. They were certainly improved, but still no one was looking at them as Super Bowl contenders or anything along those lines. Again, they were 5-5. So around week 11, week 12, Belichick has a team meeting, and he pulls out a tape of a Breeders' Cup race, a horse race. Lets the tape run for a little bit. They get to about 3/4 of the way through the race, and he stops the tape. Turns to his team and says, "Who's going to win this race?" And everyone was throwing out their guesses. I'm sure they were having a lot of fun with it. Maybe there was a Mike Francesa reference or two in there. I like to believe there was. But then Belichick stops everyone and he says, "Who cares? There's still a quarter of the race to go." The point being, it doesn't matter what the standings are after 11 or 12 weeks. It didn't matter that season. The Patriots would go on to win their final 6 regular season games. They'd win their 3 playoff games, take home the Lombardi Trophy. But this is the story of every NFL season just about. Sure, the standings matter. Sure, you'd rather be in a good position after 11 weeks than thinking about the draft next year. But there's still a lot of football left to play. And I point that out because there are a lot of narratives beginning to form. This is the year we have the changing of the guard, it seems, right? The Bills are no longer at the top of the AFC East. It's the Patriots. The Colts have come out of nowhere to shock everybody. They're 8-2. The Chiefs, looks like they're finally not going to win the AFC West. It's either going to be the Chargers or the Broncos, but the Broncos seem to have a stranglehold. 9-2, 3 games up in the loss column on the Chiefs. Shoot, the 3 teams that everyone thought were going to be at the top of the AFC, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, none of them are in first place as things stand right now. But none of that matters because every single team has strengths and weaknesses, and those could be accentuated in any direction for the remainder of the season. Injuries. We don't know what injuries are going to happen. Of course, that's always a factor in football. But you can go through all the best teams in the AFC, the NFC, and even though it might look like one team has the upper hand, there are ways they can be exposed. Look at the Broncos right now. They're 9-2, the top of the AFC. Defense looks amazing. One of the best units in the league, if not the best unit. But there's always that chance that Bo Nix is not going to play the way they need him to play. He was great against the Chiefs. Had some huge 3rd and long conversions. But there have been times this year where he's just looked a little uneasy in the pocket. The week before beating the Chiefs, they scored 10 points against the Raiders at home. So you really do never know. The Indianapolis Colts, also at the top of their division, the AFC South. They're 8-2. A surprise team, to be sure. Daniel Jones having an amazing season. Defense has played well, and they got some reinforcements at the trade deadline. That running game is really the engine that makes the entire thing go. But as we saw against the Steelers a few weeks ago, Daniel Jones can turn back into a pumpkin at any point and start throwing the ball to the other team. Head on over to the AFC East. You've got the Patriots, another huge surprise team, sitting at 9-2. It looks like with their schedule, it's going to be tough for the Bills to catch them. But do we really know how good the Patriots are? Their schedule so far this season has been cake. And it's not their fault. The reason they're in first place and the Bills are not is that they've taken care of business. They've won 8 in a row, and yes, they beat the Panthers and the Saints and the Titans and the Browns and the Falcons and the Jets. But they've done what they were supposed to do. The Bills are sitting here with 3 losses. One to the Patriots that they should not have lost. Lost a game to the Falcons that they should not have lost. And they lost a game to the Dolphins that they should not have lost. But going back to the Patriots, There are certainly flaws in this team that could be exposed moving forward. Drake May has been taking a lot of sacks, more sacks than last year, despite an improved offensive line. Their pass defense hasn't been great at times. Their red zone defense leaves a lot to be desired. I believe they're 31st in the league. That will come back to bite them in the playoffs if it stays that way. And they're a young team. We don't know how they're going to respond in the playoffs. Pressure-packed situations against better teams, teams that are good on both sides of the ball. Head on over to the NFC, and it seems like the Eagles and the Rams are the class of the conference. The Rams seem to have very few flaws, but injury bug came back to bite them pretty bad this week. Lost a few of their starters. The Eagles, and we'll get to them in a second, seems like there's a little bit of trouble in paradise brewing. That offense has been a concern, to say the least. But they're still 8-2. They're getting it done, beating good teams. They know how to do it. They know how to win late in the season. They know how to win in January. How about the NFC North? Do we think the Bears are going to hang on? What about the Lions? The Lions were a Super Bowl favorite heading into the season. They've looked really good at times, and then really their offense, they've struggled against some of the better competition. They struggled against the Chiefs' defense, the Packers' defense, last week against the Eagles' defense. Their offensive line, which really was the thing that made that offense go last year, they haven't quite been the same. They've let up far more pressure than they did a year ago. And that's going to impact Jared Goff. The Packers, who were everyone's darling after they traded for Micah Parsons, the defense has been good, but the offense has been sort of hit or miss. Back and forth. They look like world beaters against the Steelers one week, and then the next 2 weeks against the Panthers and Eagles, they can't piss a drop on offense. Then they come back and play the Giants, and they look okay at times, but a lot of talent, but a lot of inconsistency there. People talking about firing Matt LaFleur now. We got a long way to go, just like we do every single season at this point. And like Belichick said in that Patriots locker room when they were watching the Breeders' Cup, who cares who you think is going to win the race right now? Because we've got a lot of football left to play. Now, one of those teams I just mentioned, the Philadelphia Eagles, it seems like there's some trouble brewing in paradise. And I feel like we have this same conversation every year, pretty much around this time of the season. The Eagles' passing game is suddenly pretty underwhelming, and it seems limited. All you got to do is go and stop the run, and you're going to be able to stop the Eagles' offense. But no matter what, they keep winning. Now, if you look at the Eagles the last few seasons, they were, 14-3, then 12-5, then 13-4. Now they're 8-2. They've played in 2 Super Bowls. They won last year. They're not a dynasty yet, and even if they won this year, I don't think you would call them a dynasty. But they're in the middle of a pretty good window here. Now, you would hope that some of the players on the team would be a little bit more like, hey, man, we have the opportunity to do something special. We can win multiple Super Bowls. We can keep this thing going for a while. But there's a funny thing with human nature, and it almost always crops up. This is why it's so tough to repeat. Because once you get that first championship, then players can allow themselves to be a little bit more, I want something for me. There's a little less of sacrifice and selling out for the team. And that becomes especially true when one player starts getting more credit than everyone else when they know he probably doesn't deserve it. Now, at the center of these Eagles' passing issues is their quarterback, Jalen Hurts. From a passing perspective, he's a limited player. That doesn't mean he's not a good quarterback. You have to account for him in the run game, and that's a very valuable thing. He's a good thrower of the football on the outside. That's where he's most comfortable, outside the numbers. Good downfield thrower on those shot plays. And so the Eagles have done a tremendous job of building up around Jalen Hurts and accentuating his strengths, minimizing his weaknesses. Since 2022, even before Saquon Barkley, they've put a great offensive line, great running game around him. And this makes it so difficult when you pair that with Hurts' skills as a passer because you have a choice. And I'm oversimplifying things here. I know defenses are a little more complex than you're just playing single high versus too high or stacking the box or playing with the light box, but just stay with me on this one. You have a choice when you play the Eagles. Do you sell out to stop the run and leave one-on-ones on the outside, or do you play two shell? Do you play zone coverages where you're more concerned with the downfield passes, and that gives the Eagles an advantage in the run game in the middle of the field? Because the fact that they have a quarterback who can run, that's an extra player. Because instead of having 5 offensive linemen and a tight end, for instance, going out and blocking, so you got 6 guys blocking against 6 or 7 defenders potentially, the fact that you have a quarterback means somebody has to account for the quarterback. So he ends up being like a blocker. And if you don't account for him, he can take the ball and he can keep it. So the Eagles have a distinct advantage in the run game. Now, I know it hasn't been great this year. It hasn't been firing on all cylinders like it has in the past, and that's something that they still absolutely need to figure out. But for the last 3 years, that running game has been top of the league. And the Eagles have capitalized on it because when teams have loaded up to stop the run, they've had one-on-one opportunities on the outside. And who do they have on the outside? A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Smith is a speedster, and A.J. Brown is someone who's as good as anyone in one-on-one situations and contested catches. So that they have a system that's built perfectly for what Jalen Hurts likes to do. But he's not comfortable throwing the ball in the middle of the field. And you've seen plenty of instances this year, certainly in the last few weeks, where Hurts won't pull the trigger on throws. Because that's not the type of player he is. He's not comfortable working in the middle of the field. He's not comfortable playing with timing and rhythm. He doesn't do those little things to move defenders or anything along those lines. He doesn't quickly go through his reads. So you do have a limited passing game. And it hasn't mattered who the offensive coordinator is. He's had 4 in the last 4 years. It doesn't matter. It's kind of the same thing. You can attack on the outside for the most part. You can do things off of the run game, but that's about it. And I think what you're seeing with this frustration, and again, I don't want to get into the minds of these players too much. I'm not in the locker room. I'm talking to you about this based on secondhand reports. I don't talk to anyone. I don't know anyone. I don't have any contacts. But you're clearly seeing some frustration. There was a report out this week that there's a lot of frustration coming out of the Eagles locker room. And there's a reason for that. Because people get tired of quarterbacks getting all the credit when they're sitting there in the film room and they're like, there were 5 throws in this game that he should have thrown and he didn't. And then he ran around and either scrambled for 5 yards or took a sack or threw an incompletion. Then you look at his contract, and he's paid very well for a quarterback. And then you listen to people for the last year, ever since they won the Super Bowl, and he won the Super Bowl MVP, even though it probably should have gone to a defensive player. You listen to that, and you see people saying he's a top 5 quarterback now because he won a Super Bowl. I promise you, everyone inside that building knows that Jalen Hurts is not a top 5 quarterback. And as trivial as that is, as trivial as you think the contract should be, players are humans. And just like you don't like someone getting credit for something they don't deserve credit for at work, or if you played high school sports or college sports and someone is the coach's favorite and they can never do any wrong, that stuff gets tiresome. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that with the Eagles right now. Now, it doesn't mean it has to derail them. I think we were having this exact same conversation this time last year. In fact, I remember writing an article about how Hurts was not seeing the field, not playing well. He had a bad game against the Panthers that the Eagles managed to win, but we were having the same discussion. And the Eagles straightened things out. And even though Hurts didn't play well in the first 2 games of the playoffs, Eagles still won. And then he picked things up in the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl, and they went on to win. So, as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of football left to play. This thing could go in a number of different directions. During the last 2 seasons, we've seen it go in completely opposite directions. In 2023, the Eagles were 10-1 and then kind of collapsed. Didn't even win their division, got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. And then last year, they corrected things, went on to win the Super Bowl. Now, I want to stay in the NFC East and talk about another team that will most definitely not be making the playoffs this year. That's the New York Giants. My New York Giants. Once again, start the season 2-8. Then they decide to fire Brian Daboll, which I think it was the correct move. What he had done here was no longer defensible. He had a great first season when there were no expectations. The Giants made the playoffs, won a playoff game with Daniel Jones, and then everything collapsed from there. I believe he went, 11-33 over the next 2.5 seasons? You didn't see much improvement in the team. There was talent there. I'm not trying to defend Joe Shane. I'm not like an advocate of his or anything like that. Like, he's done some good things, done some bad things. But there was enough talent on this team for the Giants to have leads late in games against the Bears, who lead their division, the Broncos, who lead their division, and the Cowboys, who are at very least above the Giants in the division. And the Giants lost all 3 of those games. Situational management, player development, those seem to be things that just were not good with this group. And quite frankly, I think the Giants need to go in another direction altogether. So that begs the question, who should they be after? Now, hopefully the Giants have learned their lesson from the last 10 years that they should not go after a flavor-of-the-week coordinator who has no NFL head coaching experience. They should not go out and get another offensive or defensive coordinator that everyone loves who has no track record of being a successful head coach at the NFL level. That's what they've been doing since Tom Coughlin, and it just has not worked out. They went from Coughlin to Ben McAdoo, offensive coordinator, no head coaching experience, had 1 good year. Year 2 was a disaster. Then they went to Pat Shurmur. He's the only one of their recent head coaches since Tom Coughlin who had a little bit of head coaching experience, but it wasn't very good. He had 2 years with the Browns. I think they won 4 games and 5 games in those 2 years. Had a little interim head coach experience with the Eagles, but he hadn't proven an ability to do it before. I think he was a good offensive mind. I don't think he gets enough credit for he had a pretty good season with Daniel Jones in Jones' first year. He had a decent record of developing some young quarterbacks, having them play above their actual talent level, but just didn't work out as a head coach. Then they went on to Joe Judge, the Giants did. Everyone was so excited about that first season of his where they almost won the division with 6 wins. And then year 2 was an even bigger disaster. Again, no head coaching experience. It didn't work out. And then you have Brian Daboll. Again, first year looked pretty decent. Next 3 years, we're not. They need a head coach. They need someone who has run an NFL operation. Someone who cares about both sides of the ball. Someone who's involved in all sides of the ball. Someone who knows how to lead a group of men. Someone who knows how to develop players. Someone who knows how to develop coaches. Someone who knows how to manage the situations of the game. How to teach the situations of the game. They need someone who can change the culture. Now, if you've listened to this podcast or read my content, you know who the number 1 person is on my list. It's Bill Belichick. And I know he's at UNC right now. We don't even know if he'd be available. He did release a statement last week saying that he's focused on UNC. My thoughts on that are this. 1, he has to say that. And he might very well mean it, but he has to say that because even if he wanted the Giants job, there would be no guarantee that he would get it. He's not a shoo-in. So he has to maintain that I'm dedicated to UNC football for recruiting purposes. You don't want to lose players. You don't want to lose potential recruits. You don't want guys going to the transfer portal. But if he was available, the Giants should absolutely go after him. No one has more experience than him. No one has won more than him. He's had his hand involved in every aspect of his team, offense, defense, special teams. Now, I know his last few years in New England weren't great. I think there were some unique circumstances around those final seasons, but we have to call a spade a spade. They were not good seasons. But I also think they were blown way out of proportion. Do you guys remember last offseason? Mike Vrabel was available. Personally, I was hoping the Giants would go out and get him. I know Jets fans had Vrabel at the top of their list. The Patriots, they made the shrewd move of getting rid of Gerard Mayo, even though he'd only been there for 1 year, because Vrabel was available. Now, we all thought, everyone thought, me, you, fans, Mike Vrabel was the top coaching candidate, was a great head coach. I think everyone thought that because of the culture he brings. He's seemingly a good manager of situations. You know what type of football team he's going to bring. He's going to bring a tough team on both sides of the ball. But did you know that Vrabel's 6 seasons with the Titans, his only head coaching experience, they were nearly identical and even slightly less impressive than Belichick's final 6 years with the Patriots? Belichick's worst 6 years in New England? During that time, Vrabel won 54 regular season games. Belichick won 52. Practically a wash. The difference was Belichick was 3-2 in the playoffs with a Super Bowl win. Vrabel was 2-3 in the playoffs with no Super Bowl wins. In fact, he didn't win a playoff game after the 2019 season. Now, I know what you're saying. Wasn't that 2018 Super Bowl that Belichick won? Didn't he have Tom Brady at quarterback? And yes, he did. That's a fair point. However, that was not a team where Brady was just putting the Patriots and Belichick on his shoulders and winning them game after game after game. If you remember, the passing game struggled down the stretch in 2018. The Patriots turned to their run game. I think they had something like 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns in the playoffs. Didn't mean Brady didn't have good moments, but that Super Bowl, that was a defensive-led Super Bowl win. The Patriots shut down the Rams 13-3. That was not a game that they won because of their offense. That was not a game they won because Tom Brady was their quarterback. That was a game that they won because Bill Belichick was their head coach. Belichick shut down Sean McVay. You know, the same Sean McVay who right now is the face of offensive football and innovative offensive football in the NFL. And he did so using Vic Fangio's scheme, a scheme that he saw him use effectively against McVay earlier that year, implemented it in just 2 weeks. That means he had to teach it to his players, teach it to his coaches, and they had to be effective with it. And that defense, by the way, is the fad defense that everyone's trying to implement around the NFL today. The other type of defensive scheme that people are trying to implement today is Brian Flores' scheme and his intricate blitz designs. Well, Flores was the defensive coordinator of the Patriots that year. Belichick developed him. Again, just based on that performance alone, I have a hard time saying that the game has passed Belichick by when he's using the modern schemes, modern defensive schemes to beat the most innovative offensive coach in the game right now. Yeah, it was 6 years ago, but that's still pretty significant. But let's get back to the comparison between Belichick and Vrabel. It wasn't those final years with Brady where the Patriots struggled. It was the years after. Specifically in those final 2 seasons, where Belichick made the ill-fated decision to have Matt Patricia be his offensive coordinator. Mac Jones' development suffered, and the Patriots went on to win 12 games in their final 2 seasons with Belichick as the head coach. Interestingly enough, Mike Vrabel's Titans, they won 13 games in his final 2 seasons, a difference of 1 game. What's even more interesting is that the Patriots' defense during those 2 years was better in scoring, better in total yards, and on offense, they were better in scoring, total yards, and passing offense than Vrabel's Titans, which is all really interesting because I think the big argument against Belichick right now is, well, he's still a good defensive mind maybe, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing on offense. Doesn't know how to develop a quarterback, aside from the fact that he developed Brady, but we'll get into that another day. Everyone's concerned that he would stunt the growth of whatever young quarterback he had. Did you hear any of those concerns with Vrabel this past offseason? You didn't, huh? Yeah, me neither. There were no concerns that he would stunt Drake May's growth or the offense under the Patriots would stink under Vrabel, which is interesting because, again, the Titans' offense under Vrabel, those final 2 seasons, was worse than the Patriots' offense under Belichick in his final 2 seasons. So it's hard for me to square that and say, oh, Belichick couldn't do exactly what Vrabel's doing in New England right now if he went to the Giants. But aside from that, if you're truly concerned, just understand that the conditions leading to those Patriots struggles in 2022 and 23 will not be in place in New York next year. The Giants have a quarterback in Jackson Dart who has good physical tools, has a strong arm, he can make plays with his legs, he can add on to an offense and has just a good feel for the game. They have a dynamic receiver in Malik Neighbors, the type of player who wasn't anywhere near New England in the last few years. They have a great left tackle in Andrew Thomas. Belichick will have more to work with up front. This won't be the same situation offensively that he had with Mac Jones. And defensively, whatever you think of Belichick as a head coach, you know he will absolutely have that defense humming by midseason next year if he's with the Giants. That D-line with Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, of course, all probably won't be there next year because that's just the way things work, but guessing most of those guys will. And that's a better D-line than he had to work with in his final years in New England as well. The bottom line is that I truly don't think that the game has passed Belichick by. I'm not going to look at his final 2 years and say that when I've got 22 years before that of evidence. And if you're the Giants, do you really want to forego making a run at him right now when you can probably get him? Because what? You want to go sign some McVay, Shanahan coaching tree offensive coordinator who has no head coaching experience? You really want to go through that again? And if you do want to make a move for someone with NFL head coaching experience, which you should be doing, who's going to be better than Belichick? Kevin Stefanski? Seriously? No, I'm not holding out a lot of hope that this is going to happen. I think even if Belichick was available, the Giants would not be smart enough to go out and get him. But we'll see. It's got to turn around at some point, right? All right. Let's wrap up today's episode with a few quick hitters around the league. J.J. McCarthy, Vikings quarterback, has not played well this season. He's kind of in a tough position because this was his first NFL action. Missed the entire season last year and didn't even get to practice because he was recovering from it, or I guess going through surgery and rehab for his knee injury. So he didn't even get those practice reps, and this offseason was not about him improving on year one. This was an offseason that was about getting back to 100% health-wise. And it hasn't helped that he's missed a couple games this year as well. He needs experience. He needs to play because there are going to be growing pains that he needs to iron out. And unfortunately for him, he's in a situation where there were some high expectations based on the fact that the Vikings were really good last year, and Kevin O'Connell seems to be a quarterback whisperer who can make anyone look good in his system. And McCarthy has not looked good, and that's obviously a concern for the Vikings and their fans. The only thing I'll say is just give it some time. It takes time for quarterbacks to develop. When you draft a quarterback as high as they drafted McCarthy, everything in the building needs to be about his development and him being successful. In this case, that means playing him. Unless he's unhealthy and you think that's hurting his growth and standing in the locker room, I think you got to keep playing him. You got to keep letting him work out the kinks, go through those rookie growing pains, which he didn't get to do during his rookie season, and you'll be better off in the long run. At very least, the more he plays, the more perhaps he gets exposed, the earlier you can make a decision on moving on from him. But I like I said, I don't like to think that way. I think you need to give him far more time to see what he can do. Heading over to Atlanta, just awful news for the Falcons and for Michael Penix. I loved him coming out of college, loved the way he threw the ball. He was the best downfield thrower. Last season, his final 3 games were really good. I mean, really good. It wasn't just that he put up big numbers because he was throwing screens and guys were taking it for yards after the catch. His anticipation, his ball placement, his ability to attack downfield. I made a remark, and I stand by it, that in his 3 games last year, he made more big-time throws than Drake May and Caleb Williams did combined during their rookie seasons. So I had high expectations for Penix this year, and unfortunately it's been just a little bit uneven. Hasn't been that consistent. You know, I chalk it up to it being this is an extension of his rookie season. He started 3 games last year, started, 9 or 10 games this year. He's almost at a full season worth of NFL experience. There are going to be some kinks. There are going to be some things to iron out, and eventually you hope that he levels off or just steadily increases moving forward. But we're not going to get a chance to see that this year because he suffered another ACL injury, had several in college. It's not going to end his career, I don't think, but it stinks because it's likely going to impact his play next year. It could impact the way the Falcons approach the quarterback position this offseason. And I just hope that he bounces back and is able to come back better than ever next year. And finally, that brings us to Shedeur Sanders. He's getting his first NFL start this weekend. It's probably the first time in the history of the NFL that anyone's been excited for the first career start of a 5th-round draft pick. But nonetheless, Sanders will take on the Raiders, and it will be interesting to see how he does. I don't know how much you can take away from last week's performance. He was going out there cold. First NFL action. Didn't get any reps with the first team. That's, by the way, I know that was a big topic of discussion that week. That's completely normal. Completely normal for a backup quarterback not to get many or any reps with the first team. But we'll see how he does this week when Kevin Stefanski has the ability to game plan specifically for Sanders, put the plays in that Sanders likes, feels comfortable with. The thing I'll be looking for is, can he play with timing and rhythm? Sanders is not an especially physically talented quarterback. I think he's above average, but he doesn't have enough physical talent to get himself out of situations if he's not doing the little things right. And what are the little things? It's getting the ball to the right place, distributing the ball, going through your reads quickly, processing quickly, making good decisions. I think all those are areas where he needs a lot of improvement. You saw it in college. You saw it in the preseason. He's slow to do all of it. Everything he needs to do quicker. And that's one reason why he took so many sacks in Colorado. He took a lot of sacks in the preseason, that one game against the Rams. He needs to just be in that mindset of, I hit my back foot, the ball's out. It'll be interesting to see how he performs because however it goes, good or bad, there's going to be a lot of reaction. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. I won't be able to do a show next week during Thanksgiving, but I will see you all in 2 weeks. Enjoy the time with your family. Enjoy some great NFL football. This is the time of the year where we start to get more Thursday, Friday, Saturday games around the holidays. Again, absolute nightmare for my wife, but I couldn't be happier when there's NFL football on just about every day of the week. Again, I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll see you next time.